Thank you for inviting me to give this talk. I love to talk to Chinese colleagues and students. I think there seems to be particular interest in learner emotions and motivation in China, and I'm really happy about that. As you read out my CV, I felt that maybe I asked you to report too much because you know this doesn't really matter. What matters is the kind of stories that you investigate, the problems you encounter, and the fun you have in doing the research. And then at some point you end up, becoming president of associations. Yeah, good. And you get awards, brilliant. But that's not the reason why you do research. I mean, you do research because you have fun. Just like as a student, you enroll to study English or you enroll to study linguistics. You don't do it, you may have ulterior motives, but in the moment, you just want to enjoy what it is you're doing. And that's what I experience every time I sit at my computer and I collaborate with colleagues all over the world, and I look at data sets and we ask questions, and that's the excitement. So I would say that the best moments are when you find something in your data and you try to explain it. That's the best moment. And then everything else, you get your degree. Yes, of course. I mean, you deserve it. You worked for it. And your paper gets published, and it's nice to see your name on paper. And the first time you get really excited and you show it to your mom and dad and to your friends. And then the second time, your mom and dad and friends won't be that impressed anymore. And when it's your 400th paper, you just stop waving them around because it doesn't really matter that much anymore. So let's get going then. I have always been interested in the so-called good learner paradigm. It's a concept that appeared in the mid-1970s. Rubin, who asked why some learners end up being more successful than others in a second language, despite the fact that they were sitting in the same classroom with the same teacher and the same material, and some got really good grades, others didn't. So the question was why? And Rubin thought that maybe it was linked to the strategies that the learners were using. And the implication was that if you could locate what the good learner strategies, maybe you could tell teachers how they could help improve the performance of these students who weren't using the right strategies and who weren't good learners. After a while, researchers started to wonder whether good learners may have specific cognitive or personality profiles. And the Canadian researchers, Naiman, et Alia, and colleagues were particularly interested in the role of extroversion. And their hypothesis was that extrovert students were probably better students. And when they checked, it turned out that that was not true, that the extroverts had some advantages in oral communication. Introverts had advantages in written language, but you couldn't say that the good language learner was more extrovert than the introvert. In fact, this personality dimension turned out not to have any significant effect on test results. So this whole paradigm was in fact mired in theoretical and methodological problems. First, it is extremely difficult to pinpoint a learner strategy. Secondly, it's hard to operationalize the dependent variable, namely how do you measure the goodness of a foreign language learner, because you can't really use the test results if the test result is your dependent variable. So how do you measure goodness? And all the research that looked at the effect of personality traits on second language acquisition and performance, there were some relatively weak relationships that explained limited amounts of variance. So there's been growing consensus in the field of applied linguistics that Rubin's 1975, that the assumption that poor language learners can become good ones was probably over-optimistic. So is there a way forward? So in the paper that I published with my former master student, Rashid Mefta, we argue that yes, there is a way forward, namely that context-dependent foreign language learner classroom emotions may in fact be more strongly linked to success in the foreign language rather than context-independent personality traits. So these personality traits are in a way too removed to have a direct effect on success or lack of success in the foreign language class. So the idea is that the relationship between personality traits and emotions, that they are related, but that the emotions are also shaped by things that happen in the dynamic context, both at micro level, meaning within the individual or between the individual and a peer, another person sitting in the class. The context could also be the meso context. So what happens in the classroom, or what happens in the school, and in fact, what happens outside of the school at a macro level social context. So if you are studying a foreign language and your government declares that that government is a hostile one and that and everybody should hate that government, then it will have an effect on the enthusiasm of language learners learning that target language, because they suddenly realize that their parents tell them, why are you studying that language? You know, everybody hates that country and hates that language, so you shouldn't be studying that. So it might have a negative effect on their classroom emotions and on their motivation. Another way, another fact is that emotions could be linked to the choice of particular strategies, to students' willingness to communicate, and to their willingness to engage in interactions in the foreign language class. And we all know that if students are willing to communicate and do engage, then they will typically improve their performance and they will progress more quickly. So one way forward also to avoid the problem of measuring goodness would be to ask learners their own subjective statements about how good they are relative to the group average. And so that's what we did in our study. We asked them, you know, compared to the average in your classroom, would you say that you are rather above or rather below the average? So it's one way to get some data about goodness. And we argued that learners who feel that they are good are more likely to share classroom emotions rather than scores on personality traits. Okay, now in this talk, I'm talking about the emotional profile of the good language learner, but of course, I'm not denying the fact that there are also cognitive profiles and that cognitions does play a role. It's just not what I'm investigating. So intelligence, language aptitude, domain general auditory processing, all these factors explain variance in success. in second language acquisition. And I particularly like the recent work by my friend and colleague Kasia Saito and Tierney. They look at auditory precision and how it affects naturalistic second language learner during study abroad. And what they observed was that learners who had lots of input in the second language, that their prosodic accuracy improved, but that those who had low pitch acuity, they didn't progress much, and they suffered more from interference of their first language. So this is a clear example that the good language learner, that it's partly also linked to cognition, but it's not what I'm investigating. So I got interested in learner emotions through positive psychology. And it was, in fact, my friend Peter McIntyre and Tammy Gregerson and Sarah Mercer who discovered positive psychology, and they realized that it could be used in applied linguistics to try and explain what happens in classroom. And the main tenet of positive psychology is that we should not just focus on the things that go wrong in life and on people who have pathologies, but that we should also look at how normal people live with the aim of helping them thrive and flourish. So these are really the keywords of positive psychology. So it doesn't mean that they put on a rosy spectacles and ignore everything that is negative in learners or in people. So they do not deny the existence of problems, but instead of only looking at the problems as you typically do in traditional psychology, they introduced positive topics, and you have a number of these positive topics in front of you. So they typically refer to personality, to institutions also, and to psychophysical states like flow. And so I have done research also on flow, and it is very much linked to enjoyment. So positive psychology has had a huge impact on second language acquisition research. I think that, in fact, any language teacher should know about positive psychology, because if you are a teacher, you have to provide your students with hope and encourage them to be courageous and to be optimistic and creative and happy and everything. And it will make them more resilient and gritty, so that they acquire, wisdom. And I think that laughter in the classroom is really very important. Now, the broader theoretical background is the broaden and build theory by positive psychologist Barbara Fredrickson. She claimed, and I totally agree with that positive emotions can neutralize the effect of negative emotions. So being able to laugh helps you overcome your anxiety. And if you experience positive emotions, you're more likely to develop your thought-action repertoire, and you build psychological resources such as resilience. If you're in the grip of negative emotions, you feel threatened. So it means you will hide, you will remain silent, and you will not learn much. And your test results will be bad, and that will discourage you even more, will demotivate you even more. And so you will be caught in a negative spiral. So the aim for teachers then is to lift students into a positive spiral where they are having more fun, they get better results, which motivates them better, it goes up rather than down. The other important theoretical basis is that of complex dynamic systems theory, the idea that there are no simple cause effects between variables. There are always a multitude of interacting factors. They are interacting with other learner variables, but also situational and other factors. And it includes linguistic abilities, physiological reactions, appraisals, pragmatics, interpersonal relationships, specific topics being discussed during the class, because you may really enjoy your English class, but you may hate a particular topic, or you may hate a particular teacher or the person you are sitting next to, and that will have an effect on how you, on your behavior in the classroom. So how you feel fluctuates over time, second by second, minute by minute, but also week by week or by month or by year. So you can look at this from various perspectives. And complex dynamic systems means that there are butterfly effects, meaning that some event in your classroom can have positive consequences or negative consequences sometime later. So say you're being humiliated by your teacher. I mean, that might not, you may be pretty resilient and not react too much to it. But then weeks later, you may suddenly remember how you were humiliated by the teacher, and it might completely demotivate you. And the other thing is also possible, the teacher who encouraged you and said, you know, maybe you had a bad test score, but I really liked the little text you wrote. So you may think, oh, okay, so maybe I'm not that bad. It might not change how you see or how you perceive yourself or the foreign language class at that moment, but maybe in a couple of weeks, it will lift you out and it will help you get into the positive spiral rather than the negative one. And then obviously we have causality going in different directions. So the more you enjoy your class, the more proficient you become, and the more proficient you become, the more you enjoy your class. So this is bidirectional causality. The other aspect is nonlinearity. So that as your language skills improve, they do not improve in a straight line. You know, you might hit a plateau, you might regress at some point, and then you might go up again. So it's never a straight line. We have nonlinear relationship, and everybody's trajectory is pretty unique. So I mentioned Peter McIntyre before. This is us, I think in 2012, when we presented a first version of our most cited paper, The Two Faces of Janus on Anxiety and Enjoyment, in the foreign language classroom at the AAAL conference. I think it was in Boston. And we, the originality of the paper was that we wanted a more holistic view. So instead of just focusing on anxiety, we added enjoyment, and we were interested in the relationship between anxiety and enjoyment. And so we used the definition from Elaine Horwitz, who became a really good friend of ours, and who defined anxiety as this distinct complex of self-perceptions, beliefs, feelings, behaviors related to classroom language learning, arising from the uniqueness of language learning process. And she, in talks, she would talk about anxiety as the pink dress syndrome. I don't know whether you've come across that metaphor. The idea is that you are invited to an evening, and you think that everybody will be dressed in pink because you heard the word pink, and you turn up at the evening, and the doors open, and you enter the room, and you realize that you are the only one dressed in pink, and that everybody else is dressed in black. So you stand out. So this is what foreign language learners may feel like in the foreign language classroom, when they have to express themselves in the foreign language, they feel clumsy, they feel embarrassed, they cannot be as sophisticated as in their first language, and it's a shock to the system. And then Peter and I defined enjoyment as a complex positive emotion that captures interacting dimensions of challenge and perceived ability that reflect human drive for success in the face of difficult tasks. Enjoyment occurs when people not only meet their needs, but exceed them to accomplish something new or even unexpected. And so we distinguished enjoyment from pleasure, because we said pleasure is something superficial. You can have pleasure in, you know, sitting next to the swimming pool and drinking a fresh orange juice. That's good, but you're not making any effort for that pleasure. The pleasure comes from the environment, but you are not much involved in creating that pleasure. However, to enjoy something, there must be an element of challenge. It must be difficult enough for you to want to invest energy and effort and concentration in doing this. And so in our research, we used the foreign language classroom anxiety scale. The original scale that Elaine Horitz designed had 33 items. Peter had used an 8-item version for his PhD, and we used that short scale in our 2014 paper. And then we developed our own foreign language enjoyment scale with 21 items. And we decided that there would be items that referred to the learner, him or herself, to the classroom environment, more specifically the peers and the teachers. And so I think in the original list had about 50 items, and then we picked the ones that we thought were the best ones, and then we pilot tested it, and the final version was 21 items. However, 21 items is still a bit much. If you do research these days, you want good, sharp, validated instruments. And so with Eloise Botes, we developed a short 9-item version that taps into 3 dimensions: teacher appreciation, personal enjoyment, and social enjoyment. And with my good friend Chen Chen Li, we also developed a Chinese version of this original 21-item scale, an 11-item scale, as you see. And again, this has been used massively in the Chinese EFL context. And then another interesting emotion that has cropped up relatively more recently, first in Poland, then in China, boredom, which refers to a negative emotional state where learners experience dissatisfaction, disappointment, annoyance, inattention, lack of motivation. And Chen Chen, and you see her picture there in the corner, refer to control value theory to describe boredom as a negative emotion with a very low degree of activation that arises from activities that are either too challenging or under challenging. So you get bored when something is too easy. You get equally bored when something is so hard that you can't do it at all. And so the scale that we designed originally had 32 items with 7 factors. And I was particularly interested in the first one, the foreign language class boredom. And I will show you that here. So it's the first factor with 8 items. So you see these are items that refer to how the learner reacts to perception of time in the English class, or how excited or bored the learner is in the English class. And then another emotion that I've grown really interested in is foreign language peace of mind. It's a Chinese concept, indicator of psychological well-being in collectivist cultures, which we developed with Li Zhu and colleagues as he was doing his PhD at Free University in Brussels. And there you see that it is a positive emotion. It is different from enjoyment in the sense that it is more about low arousal. So it's about not getting stressed in the language class and feeling peace and comfort and inner peace and harmony. And what we found was obviously that peace of mind is positively correlated with enjoyment. But that in regression analysis, the effect of enjoyment on self-perceived proficiency became insignificant after peace of mind was controlled for. So I would love to see more research on this concept of peace of mind and see to what extent it explains performance in more or less collectivist cultures. And we've done some research also on Morocco, and we discovered that it plays a role there too. I think, in fact, that peace of mind plays a role everywhere, but we need more research. So why have I chosen these four emotions? Because they represent both, we have two positive emotions on top, two negative emotions at the bottom, and then we have low activation emotions on the left and more high activation emotions on the right. So it feels like we have a nice balance there. Now, one important thing is to explain that that emotions do not appear fully formed in the foreign language classroom. It takes some time before they develop, and it can start as a spark and it can turn into a fire. So why do emotions matter? Well, because we find in meta-analysis that people who enjoy themselves are typically more willing to communicate, and we have a large positive correlation there. That also people who enjoy themselves typically have higher scores for academic achievement, whereas for anxiety, people who are very anxious typically don't do as well in school. Also, boredom has a negative effect on language achievement. So bored students typically don't do as well. Now, I come to the study that I want to present today, which is based on data collected from 502 Moroccan English foreign language learners. They were on average 22 years old. They could choose between an English and Arabic version of the questionnaire. As you see, they were pretty multilingual. They had typically studied English for many years. And they were ranging from beginners to advanced learners. And so we asked them to report their latest English test result. And the mean score was 75, which means that they were typically good students. And then we collected information on their relative standing. So we asked them, you know, well, how good are you compared to the average in your class? And as you see, a relatively small proportion said that they were below average. A third said that they were average. And the other students felt that they were above average. And then we checked whether that statement corresponded with their test results. And that was indeed the case. So those who reported being below average had 55 on average, compared to those who were told of themselves that they were far above average. In fact, they also had the highest scores. So it means that this variable is solid. Here are the research questions then. What are the levels of these four emotions? What are the relationships between them? What's the effect of relative standing on these four emotions? And what is the effect of relative standing specifically on the three sub-dimensions of enjoyment, namely teacher appreciation, personal and social enjoyment? So to answer research question one, we just checked the descriptive statistics. So as you see, our participants reported high levels of enjoyment and peace of mind, lower levels of anxiety, and relatively low levels also of boredom. Looking at the FLE teacher personal social, you can see that the highest score was for personal enjoyment. Then looking at research question two, we found that, as expected, really, enjoyment was positively correlated with peace of mind and negatively linked to anxiety and boredom. So if you enjoy yourself in the classroom, they were typically less likely to be anxious or bored. Peace of mind was negatively linked to anxiety and boredom, and anxiety and boredom were positively correlated. So the students in our corpus who felt anxious typically also felt bored. Then looking at the results for research question three, we discovered that relative standing had a significant effect on the four emotions and the three FLE dimensions, with medium to large effect sizes. So as you see, the effect was in fact strongest for anxiety. So people who felt that they were below average, they were typically the ones who were most anxious, and then also who had the lowest levels of peace of mind and were more bored and didn't much enjoy the foreign language class. Looking at the sub-dimensions, as you see there, the strongest effect was for FLE personal. So people who felt that they were above average, they were typically the ones who agreed most that they enjoyed the class, that it was a kind of intellectual challenge for them. So here we have the results in the graph form. So you see that the more students felt above the average of the class, the more positive, the stronger the positive emotions they experienced, and the weaker the negative emotions they felt. So that was the kind of pattern that we had expected to find. And looking at the three sub-dimensions, as you see, students who felt far below or below average, they were the ones with the lowest level of teacher appreciation, personal enjoyment, and social enjoyment. So discussing the previous, discussing our findings in relation to previous research, we found that high levels of positive than of negative emotions, which is what we found in other studies. Also the positive correlation between the positive emotions and between the negative emotions, that again confirms previous research. Negative correlation between positive and negative emotions, that's again what we expected, and that relative standing had the strongest effect on anxiety. And I think it's linked to the fear that students have of standing out because their language skills aren't strong enough. Remember the pink dress syndrome. So high relative standing was linked to more foreign language peace of mind. So I think it's because students, if you feel confident in your class, you feel that you are not the weakest student in the group, that you are either average or above average. So you can avoid stressing out about this. You can feel at ease and in harmony with peers and teacher. You don't mind too much if you make a little mistake because it's not dramatic. But if you feel that all the others are better than you, then you probably fret too much, um, and you struggle in the classroom, and it's hard for you to find peace of mind in the classroom. So if you have a higher relative standing and more enjoyment, it means that you're able to face the linguistic and intellectual challenges. You can overcome difficulties and obstacles. And if you have a higher relative standing, you're also less bored, probably because if the teacher is asking people to do something that you feel is boring, maybe you have developed a strategy to cope with it, so that you don't get too dissatisfied or too disappointed. So the higher relative standing linked to higher personal enjoyment is interesting because it's the most trait-like aspect of enjoyment, namely the fact that you enjoy intellectual stimulation in the classroom. If you are at the bottom of the social hierarchy, then you may feel more restrained by anxiety and boredom, and it might just nip enjoyment in the bud, and it might hinder the emergence of peace of mind. So I realize, of course, that if you ask a student, how good are you compared to the average in the class, that perception may also be shaped by your personality. And we did a study with Pierre Resnick and Alex Panicacci, where we showed that people who score higher on trait emotional intelligence typically have a better self-perception of how good they are and how confident they are. So there are some pedagogical implications to this work. Of course, teachers cannot change learners' cognitive and personality profile. They cannot dictate optimal strategy use, but what they can do in their class is to work on the malleable social and emotional profile of learners. They can boost positive emotions in the classroom, help students not get bored, and avoid getting bored themselves. Because if you feel as a student that your teacher is bored through a process of emotional contagion, you will feel bored too. And you don't want your teacher to be anxious, because again, emotional contagion, that would be bad. So you want a confident, positive teacher. And I think that a slight improvement of learners' emotional profiles can help learners gain confidence, avoid negative thinking, engage more, work harder, which might lead to better results, which might in turn strengthen their motivation, and it might make them reconsider their relative standing. They might realize that, well, I'm no longer the weakest in the class. I've kind of improved. I'm somewhere in the middle, and that could be very encouraging. So to conclude, learners' emotions are really a driving force in foreign language classes, and it is affected by performance. Learner emotions have consistent but dynamic effects on performance, progress, and well-being. They're constantly affected by a wide range of learner internal and contextual variables. So to have the right emotional profile, it means that you have high levels of enjoyment in your class, peace of mind, not too much anxiety, not too much boredom, and these positive learner emotions and skills are part of that positive feedback loop, where you feel that it is worth putting in an effort, and where you feel that your teacher cares about you and wants everybody to improve, and is there to encourage trust, uses humor, engages in authentic communication, and where there is a clear plan for progress, where students feel, in this class, I actually learned something. I think that's really the key to progress. And here are some references.